Hello and welcome to today's Trainer Education webinar, Legacy Leadership, Growing Tomorrow's Leaders Today, hosted by HRDQ and presented by Drs. Janine Sandstrom and Lee Smith. Before we begin, please notice that there is a question and answer button. It may look like a chat box in the right-hand corner of your screen. You want to use that during the webcast to submit any questions you have. We'll go ahead and answer those questions as we receive them, possibly hold them for the Q&A session that we'll have at the end, or by email after the session. Today's webinar will last approximately 55 minutes, and we will include a brief Q&A session if time does permit. Do stay tuned at the conclusion of the broadcast for an exclusive offer. My name is Sarah Montgomery, and I will moderate today's webcast. I am in business development for HRDQ, a publisher of research-based training solutions that improve the performance of individuals, teams, and organizations. Today's presenters are Dr. Janine Sandstrom and Dr. Lee Smith. They are executive leader coaches and co-founders of CoachWorks International. They have coached top-level executives across a variety of industries in every size and type of organization. With over 40 years of combined experience, both nationally and internationally, they are the co-developers of the Legacy Leadership platform of leadership development materials, and they are co-authors of their recent book, Legacy Leadership, The Leader's Guide to Lasting Greatness. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome, Janine and Lee.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. We are excited, both Lee and I, and this is Janine, to be on the call with everyone. We've been told by trainers, facilitators, coaches, and other leadership development experts for, several years now that this legacy leadership model is one of the most flexible yet comprehensive models that they have ever used in their leadership work. So our goal this hour is to provide you with an overview of legacy leadership in such a way that you can start using some of its precepts, concepts immediately. To do that, we're going to follow the agenda that's on your screen, spending much of the time on the components that make legacy leadership's 5 best practices. To help Lee and I get started with this, to have an understanding of what you're using in your company now, we want to run a quick poll here. Is your organization currently committed to using a particular leadership model? If you would go ahead and start your responses to this immediately. We'll just take a couple of moments here while folks think about the leadership model that you're using, see if it's actually one you apply regularly but aren't committed to it, or one that you're very based on using consistently. How this will help Lee and I is with some of the examples that we'll give going through the subject matter this hour. We'll be able to refer to companies that have already a leadership program in which we have used this, others that used it as their starting program, and some that have used it just with one particular group or focus within an organization. We've got just close to 80% that have responded, and so we're closing the poll. And what you've given us is often what we are finding. In fact, quite consistently we find this, not only nationally but internationally, that many times a lot has been invested in purchasing, putting into the system a leadership development model, and are not committed to using it. So we have on the call about 14% that say, yes, we have it, but we may use it, my interpretation, sometimes and sometimes not. Others that do use it very frequently or consistently, even at this point, we find 2 or 3 of the elements of legacy leadership that are still useful for you. And with the majority on the call not having a leadership model for you or your organization right now, hopefully you'll find some things in legacy leadership that are going to be very, very valuable to what you're looking for and how you may want to utilize leadership development. Lee, would you begin by speaking directly to why we chose legacy and why we're using that as part of our description of our model?
Yes, thanks, Janine, and welcome to all of you again from me. I get to speak about the meaning of legacy, which is a term that is commonly thought to be something that you place. You have your name on buildings. It's some sort of a financial legacy or what have you, and that's not about what we're going to visit about today. The term legacy, we hear a lot around, and especially we might add that since we came up with legacy leadership, it's a term that is often used around in our field. But it's a term that comes from our value system of serving others first before ourselves, which is the kind of leader that really develops people. In legacy leadership, it means developing others as managers and leaders so they can do the same for others. It's about developing others so that they can develop others. And thereby you have sort of a 3-generational thumbprint. It also means having a leadership approach that focuses on having others be the best they can be, to learn and to grow in their work. So it is both a focus on others as well as a solid system of leadership. It's not about what you get from being such a great leader, but how you imprint and influence others in their lives to be the best they can be. So it's our hope today that even in this call that you will learn something meaningful for your own life's work and career, and that you'll be long remembered for its value to you and subsequently to others. So what about your own legacy? There's some questions that you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about legacy. So what is your life saying to others, which is a question that we ask early on in our quest for leadership qualities. What are others learning from you that adds value to their lives? What if you had a model that could help you do that, and a model that's easily transferable to others? You can begin to see, as I'm talking about legacy, that this is as much about others as it is about yourself. When we first developed the model and trying to name it, we ask ourselves these same questions. And we also, when we're out there working with leaders of all different kinds of companies, we ask them what their lives are saying to their people every day that they are leading. Legacy became the only word that we could use, and we continue to embrace it, and it has been very useful as a term to describe what we're doing. So what if you were living your legacy now? You're living your legacy whether you're intentional about it or not. It's one of those things that you can't not do. People will be remembered for certain things, and we talk a little bit about this in Best Practice 3 when we get to that part. So, and thinking about legacy then and what I've just spoken about, who do you influence? And this is an influence map that is a part of the training program that you'll see. One thing to know about this in Best Practice 3 is that you can't not influence. Even when you breathe and are around people, you are going to be influencing them in some way. Everyone in your network is influenced by you. I think you could even live in a cave and see no one, and with no one to see that you would be influencing at least your environment. So for the desired legacy, if you could design your own, you would follow a path of a leadership system that has the best interest of those around you in perspective. And as you can see on this map, people in the training often get very excited about that because you often don't stop and think, okay, besides just my immediate family, who are they then influencing because of something that I have made special to them or whatever. So this all is about a system of leadership. It is a life system. It's a way of both being and as well as doing, and you'll see that when we talk about each of the 5 practices. And it's a model that with practices that were established to develop both on the part of the leader and manager, as well as who they are as a person and how they lead, but also what they do. So this is something you can practice. This is a model that you can practice all your life. It is also a system. In other words, the 5 practices fit together like puzzle pieces, and all 5 are important, as you will see. And it has a beginning, middle, and an end, so it becomes a complete system of leadership, and you can apply it to everything you do. I would stress again that it's both a focus on people as well as a solid leadership practice. And it's about energy to influence people. It's about competencies and talents and abilities to guide and train them. And it's about interest and concern for their best interest and that of the organization they serve and that you serve. So Janine, I will pass it to you for talking about the model.
Thanks, Lee. To help give some fundamentals for the model, we wanted to go over the basic assumptions that we had built the model upon. Lee had been in training in a global oil and gas company. I've been in training and development and as an internal consultant in multiple industries, staying anywhere from 1 to 5 years inside of a company and in varying industries. What we both found when we were working on this model some 15 years ago, we began to look at the gaps of other leadership models that weren't serving our clients or weren't serving our organization in the way that we wanted it to. We laid out what were the basic assumptions of what we wanted and what was missing from some very excellent other models that just didn't feel to be as complete as we wanted it to be. Lee has mentioned the one that we came back to, this legacy. We came to it from folks are always talking about you and I. There's a possibility right this minute as we sit together in this room on the call that someone is, quote, gossiping about us. Gossip really helps create the legacy, who we are. What are people saying about us? And so many of us are just unintentional. We're unconscious about the gossip or the things that people are saying about us any given day or given time. We realized in our own research, the leaders that we were honored to know and work with, and a lot of the reading, the popular press and books that were really, really solid in the leadership development field, that it kept coming back to the reputation that people were creating and living day by day, which we have labeled legacy. And it doesn't just stop with the individual. In fact, our assumption is that effective, sustainable leadership really is not focused on the leader, him or herself. It is focused on the people that we are leading and the people that they are leading. Hence, basic assumption is leadership is created by leaders who develop other leaders. And that legacy or the results, the outcome, the obvious skills, the obvious competencies reside in others than a leader. In fact, it takes me back to a course I took almost 25 years ago. And the precept that was really drilled as a fundamental there was my success was only going to be obvious by the success of others I was leading, that the entire evaluation of that year-long program was not on me, my behavior directly, but it was on the growth and the success and the development of the people I was leading. We serve others first, then ourselves. And we're not in isolation, whether we're an individual contributor inside of an organization, the only trainer that the staff may have, the only organizational development consultant for a global enterprise. We still live within systems. And we are able to touch and move the dynamics of the system by what any one individual can actually do, though. So at that point, we really got clear that we were wanting to have a systems approach to any of these pieces, certainly within the 5 best practices. And as Sarah mentioned in our introduction, there's like 40 years of combined research and delivery globally on this kind of training. The 5 best practices each has 10 critical success skills. Those skills can be observed, they can be measured, you can see shifts and experience shifts in attitudes. Any of those different components, we were very intentional, both of us being behavioralists and paying attention to the so what. We were very attentive to the fact that you want these skills to be observable and measurable. So taking our look here at the 5 best practices, we can see that they are made up of several components. Each one of the first words is very intentionally a being component. So many of the models that you've probably used, that we taught from, that we used as internal consultants as well, it would start with the doing. What are the techniques, the tips, the things I'm supposed to be doing that's called leadership? And yet research and sustainable leaders are described as who they are first before what they do. So we are intentional about each one of the best practices begins with an element of who the individual, who the leader needs to be, while they then execute on the 2 doing parts of each one of the 5 best practices. So in taking a broad look at this, you can begin to see that we've built in several things. First of all, it's alive. It's a living design. It also is very, very flexible. We've got, in essence here, 15 different components, 3 in each one of the 5 best practices, where a focus, a particular training focus, initiative, or follow-through could be using legacy leadership as a leadership development model. It is comprehensive. We've been in organizations who have a leadership model, one that they were using for years, that actually found a place to reside inside of this, inside of the platform of legacy leadership, more as support systems and as specific tools and techniques that forward this as an overall system of leadership development for the company. We're finding it being very sustainable. And in some cases, we have trainers and facilitators who tell us it's been transformative for individuals in their organization, even they themselves, as well as being a leadership culture within the group. Lee, would you take us then into specifics on the first best practice, holder of vision and values?
Yes, well, this is best practice 1, which is holder of vision and values. And although we start with this, we have to keep in mind that it is one piece. And when you are training others, and when we've often done a 360 or something like that, we can zero in at any of the 5 without starting from 1 to 5. And so just keep that in mind as we go through these things. Best practice 1 is about direction and commitment, and it means that a leader will be setting direction and gaining commitment. When I'm working with a leader, I often even use the term unflinching commitment, which a leader needs to make in order to get to that vision in the future. So just for definitions on each one of these, we'll break them into the 3 parts that Janine described, and just go through these so you'll have a clearer understanding of them. So holder of vision and values. Holder meaning that a leader takes a stand for what it is that they want to accomplish. They hold it for everyone else to see and measure against. So it's one who keeps in hand those things that are important by embracing and encouraging their remembrance. And so they hold this forth for everyone to have and what do they hold? They hold a vision and they hold the values. The vision being those realizable goals So this sets up the anticipation of reaching those goals and intentions. And also the values. They are holder. They should model the values in everything they do. And so if you ever, if you think back about how values are often handled, I worked with a new team once who we began the training for utilizing legacy leadership as their leadership model. And so as we started, I had the team together, and I said, so tell me about your vision. And they all looked at each other curiously and said, vision. Oh, yeah, we set that up last year. And I said, okay, so it's often on a shelf somewhere. But I said, okay, so where do you have that? And so they looked curiously at each other. And one person spoke up and said, oh, we made those into wallet cards, and I have it in my wallet, in my pocket, in my back pocket. So I said, so you are sitting on your vision then. So we don't want that to happen. A legacy leader will hold out for everyone to see what the vision and what the values are. The values piece in this is where the leader sets the tone for the culture. In each of these, we have 10 critical success skills that actually measure against the 3 components of the title of the best practice. As you know, this one is holder of vision and values. And underneath that, there are 10 critical success skills that go all together to build this one competency, which is the first practice. I'd just like to point out several of these just in thinking about this. So as you can imagine, measured in every day of a leader's life is reinforcing the organization's vision and values. That would be the first success skill. And then look down at number 6, establish measurable milestones that are congruent with the vision. Very, very important to being that holder, constantly having those milestones to measure. And number 9, place importance on developing others. So you can see that this holder of vision, but also values, is emphasized by the development of others. And finally, communicate effectively, sustain processes to achieve vision and values, which is an overall arching critical success skill. So that's best practice 1, and Janine, I'll pass it on to you for best practice 2.
Thanks, Lee. Creator of collaboration and innovation. We hear a lot about collaboration in our current environment. But what does that mean, and how does it come to be inside of the culture of an organization? It doesn't just happen accidentally. So we will look at putting things together here, looking at the definitions to be very specific of what the skills are that each best practice represents. Looking at creator very, very specifically as the leader's ability to set up, to make, to engender, to create a trusting environment where collaboration and innovation can occur. That doesn't mean that that environment is passive. Oftentimes it's anything but that. It can be very dynamic, very much a push-pull, but where the intention is, regardless of someone's skill sets brought into that environment, that the leader's intent was to build the trust and to build the relationships so that ideal collaboration can, in fact, be created. And oftentimes, collaboration is the mother or father of invention. Invention doesn't happen. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. So we will find that in environments where folks are really being creative, where good products, new products, updated products are really just flying off the market or off the shelf, that this kind of environment is intentionally designed and engendered by the leader, therefore created and held in that environment. So the creator here is one who causes something to come in being through original or inventive, i.e. intentional means. Collaboration, the process of working together to achieve common goals rather than a personal agenda. We often find the word collaboration is meant with two people trying to basically fight their way to something that each one of them will accept. We put the nuance on collaboration as we use it in legacy leadership, that it really becomes a common objective, a common directive, versus someone giving up a piece just so that the other person can get a counterbalance. So it's very different in the nuances of collaboration here, that we work until we do have an equally agreed upon common set of goals, which allows for the innovation of something new or different to be created as we're achieving our results. These critical success skills, I like to look at number 10 here in the creative collaboration and innovation, that you facilitate conversation where everyone contributes their best thinking towards a task or goal. I'm reminded here of a company I worked for a long period of time, where the general leader here, the general manager, the senior leader, was just so comfortable with a particular style that he kept wanting to have similar people around him. And what we found after a period of time here is that the best thinking didn't come out. It began to be too homogenized, too similar. You could anticipate what was going to happen. And so one of the things we intentionally did here is going back to create the different requirement of best thinking and not allow people to get by with what they usually did, even if it was good. So I look at the composite here of a summary of creator of collaboration and innovation, being certain that we are requiring the best thinking and the best of everyone is one of the major components of creating collaboration and innovative culture. Lee?
Yes, so in best practice 3, this is about inspiration and leadership and influencing of that. This relates to connections with individuals, and this term influencer is one that we often lead with simply because it is it is at the heart of everything else that a leader does, is influence well. When you think about that term, influencer, remember one thing, that you can't not influence. Whether you're, as I mentioned before, whether you're a negative influencer or a positive influencer, you are going to influence one way or another. So you might as well do it well. You might as well influence it from a very positive approach. Obviously, you can't not influence. So you need to consider this in terms of your connection with individuals as a whole. Then the definitions of influencer would be one who brings about a desired effect in others by direct or indirect means. You don't have to be face-to-face with a person in order to influence them. Your entire network, as we talked about in that influence map, is directly or indirectly influenced by you. The desired effect would be higher performance levels in those you lead by influencing well. Then what do you influence? You influence the inspiration of others in the process of animating and motivating or encouraging others. You want to inspire them to learn, grow, and professionally develop and produce outcomes. You also will influence others to leadership. This ties directly back to the idea that leaders develop other leaders who develop others. And so the process of guiding and directing others to shared success will also influence their own leadership by the model that you influence them with. Some of the key critical success skills in this, I just point out several of these. One is to be adept at developing and maintaining relationships. Obviously, you want to influence well, and so you have to be out there with the people. Now, when I work with a person who is not particularly, is more of a strategic leader rather than a motivational or people side of leadership, then this is the one thing that they work on first, is that they need to develop and maintain relationships well. And so number 4 is about bringing out the best in people. You have to have some of this in order for people to follow and to do well and contribute their best. One of the key things I also have to work with leaders is to delegate so that others can develop. I could tell you story after story about that. I wish we had more time to do so. And then number 10 is lead with humility and fierce resolve to accomplish goals through others. And this is a key piece. You can't get things done without your people. And so you will accomplish your goals through them. But the legacy is not particularly about you. So you will lead with humility and fierce resolve to help others accomplish their goals. So let's stop in the middle of our looking at the 5 practices and go to this poll just to kind of experience one of the critical success skills that is on the 360 multi-rater assessment as well as the self-assessment. And so this question that you can already begin to see is, I develop and maintain strong relationships. So you would, on an assessment, you would say consistently or frequently, on average, occasionally, or not at all. So this, on the 360 that you'll see, it is a 5 decision choice. And this one is about, the first one that I talked about in this best practice, about developing and maintaining strong relationships. And I'm beginning to see that many of you do this consistently. 39%, many of you are doing it frequently, very, very good, on average, and occasionally. And so trainers, if you're a trainer, this is one of the things that you'll want to be able to do even better than you already are, is to begin to really focus on developing those strong relationships in your own leadership as a trainer or a developer of people. So we will now go to best practice 4. Thank you for participating in that. Those things are always fun, and it's good to have you involved in this call as well. So Janine, you want to take the next part?
Every time I start with one of the best practices, I get really excited, and I've heard me over the years say, this is my favorite best practice. This is the one where I really enjoy seeing leadership develop, the individuals develop, coming out of a training class really excited about a particular next step they were going to take in a best practice. So I was thinking about this particular one this morning. What hit my thoughts was the research and the intentionality that went behind the word advocator. We're so used to hearing about mentors and sponsors, coaches, teachers, others that really support us in our lives and want us to grow and move forward. Advocator for us in this model has even a level of distinction beyond mentoring, coaching, advising, supporting, to actually be the individual who is willing to take that final stand for you, who is willing to stand beside you and really look at, I'm going to give all for this person. I'm going to be certain that they are using their complete differences, that they're able to involve themselves in the good of the team and the greater community. So we indicate here that advocator is the ability to acknowledge the importance of differences. I will stand for each one of you using your best thinking to the best of your ability and wanting you to bring everything that's unique about you to the table. Advocator sometimes has to be courageous enough to take a stand and stay standing in the wake of others not really believing or not yet seeing the vision that the advocator has. I have sometimes used the example of Gandhi to indicate the extent to what advocator means for us in legacy leadership. As he was bringing a completely different perspective of humility and of leadership into the Indian culture, he was ridiculed for years, and it took quite a while for the strength of his approach to really be appreciated and still modeled now throughout history. But when you look at our definition of differences in particular here, it's not what we think of so frequently as diversity. It really means your entire culture, your entire way of thinking, your entire life experiences. We want you to bring all of yourself into the leadership role that you actually have. And by the way, from our perspective, everyone on this call is a leader. You cannot not lead. You cannot not influence, whether you're talking about your family, your community, at your office, or as a trainer in front of the room with so many folks that you're facilitating and help to learn. Every one of us are leaders, and every one of us requires really to bring our best differences and uniqueness into our lives and our work. Now, when you're talking about legacy leadership and this best practice 4, those differences also want to be amalgamated into a sense of community, in team, into those that are working together to achieve shared success. So you will see in some of the best practices, there's even a push-pull, a dynamic that could be in conflict on a particular given day between you're wanting someone to bring 100% of their differences to that team meeting, at the same time knowing that you are working towards collaboration, innovation, and community, even a consensus in that team. So it makes the critical success skills for each one of the best practices to even come more alive. But how can I, like number 4, be a connoisseur of the talent that I recognize, I value, I require the best of each person. At the same time, I'm also, as a leader, insisting on building teams that have both diverse approaches, capabilities, while I'm helping them, requiring of them, in fact, to collaborate and innovate and lead like the other best practices that we've already taken a quick look at. When I look then of moving on for wanting Lee to talk us through best practice 5, we begin to, looking at best practice 5, begin to wrap up and pull together all of the components up to this point. And Lee, what's the richness here that you want to tie for us in best practice 5?
Thanks, Janine. Well, this is the practice where the rubber hits the road, and it's one that we often find missing in other leadership models, and one that we were missing is the whole reason that we created legacy leadership is because we couldn't find a complete, cohesive model. This was often the theme missing out of other models. So we have a strong finish on this in the system of best practices, and it's about the calibrator. The calibrator is someone who indicates constant vigilance. In other words, that holder of vision in best practice 1 is also the one that keeps a constant look at getting things done. It's an interesting term, this term calibrator. It's I like to think of it as kind of like a thermostat on your heating and air conditioning, a thermostat that's constantly monitoring output so that at any given time, the leader who having their fingers on the pulse of everyone and having things well set up and influenced and all of the other things can at any given time know where they are in accomplishing the things that they're set out to do. So it's a calibrator that this best practice is about. It's about getting the desired results by holding others responsible for their work and accountable not only to themselves, but to their team and to the entire organization. So it's overall, it's about execution of what you've set out in the vision and about performance. And many companies that are now using legacy leadership are performing much better than they were. Once they get everyone on board with it, it's almost seamless in rolling out and performing against the 5 best practices. So in looking at the definitions of the calibrator, we'll see again that it's the one who sets the mark for quantitative measurement of success and acceptance, which simply means that you're constantly measuring against what is expected. In our work as coaches, we're often looking towards return on investment, which is our quantitative measurement. As trainers, perhaps you are too, and so you can be that calibrator of how well the training does within the organization. But what are you responsible for? What are you calibrating for? Responsibility, which is really the ability to respond correctly to and meet expectations. So I like to think of these two, both responsibility and accountability, as responsible for certain things and accountable to the organization, the team, or whoever. A lot of people were confused at first when we first started using both responsibility and accountability and wanted to know, okay, exactly how does this work? What does it mean? So the calibrator holds accountable and responsible their people by saying responsible to certain things to meet expectations and accountable to the team and others as they roll out this the calibration and measurement. So on the critical success skills in this one then, I would just mention that the leader will execute a strategic plan using appropriate checks and balances to reach goals. That's number one. And the strategic plan is the one that is set out in Best Practice 1, where we establish the vision, the values, the goals, the strategic plan. And so in Best Practice 5, then there's the execution using appropriate checks and balances to reach goals. So that's a key critical success skill. You'll see number 3, to ensure that team members are clear about their positions and responsibilities and how they fit into the organization's direction and deliverables. And so that one, each team member needs to be clear, and that is the leader's responsibility to provide that. We also added in number 5 the regular feedback and coaching. More and more managers are using coaching abilities and skills to draw out the very peak performance that they want and to turn around the low performance. And then number 10, to draw it all together, is that to gain commitment from the team with established accountabilities and appropriate consequences and rewards. So in the execution of the original strategic plan and working through the team in Best Practice 2 with innovation and collaboration and creativity, and then through influencing well and advocating for talent, you will be gaining that commitment from the team with the accountabilities and appropriate rewards. So that is the 5th one. So you can see that this is, when you look at all 5 together, you can see that we wanted to address in leadership every possible component that they might face at any given time. And that's and so that's what we continue to see. When we learn new things about leadership, we can often very easily fit within this model. So Janine, I'll ask to go to you for a summary.
And this may be the place, colleagues, where most of our note-taking actually happens, because we've given you so much content so quickly that I'm very thankful you've got the slides. You'll be able to go back and look at some of the nuances that Lee and I referred to so very quickly. And in getting ready to move into our question and answer session, I do want to go back and hit the high points of what Lee and I went so quickly through. That when you're looking at the 5 best practice, we're remembering that each one of them began with who are you being as a leader? Starting with the being before you move to the technical doing of the activities that a leader is accountable for. So one of our underlying assumptions in the model is we begin with who the leader is before they move on into their execution of what they are to do. You hold the vision, you create the opportunities to be that kind of a leader, you influence yourself in ways that promote this attitude as you influence others, you advocate this kind of leadership in yourself, and you calibrate it until you become it. You'll notice in this slide we have used the reference of you. Reminding ourselves that everyone on the call is a leader. We'd want you to be looking at, from this point forward, is how do you represent living your legacy in the work that you do every day? Are you, in fact, clear about your purpose or your vision for your professional life as well as your role in the organization? Are you intentional about creating the opportunities to show up that way, to step in when needs to be, to influence ways that promote the underlying values of the organization and the vision for which you also ideally are aligned? And are you taking a stand for things you believe that need to be done in the organization, or for things that want to actually stop doing? One of our major clients now is working very much around this advocating of what we're going to take enough time out to decide what we can stop doing that no longer serves our overall arching purpose here. But they admitted as last week that they're running so quite fast, they haven't taken the time to stop and really look at being advocates for what needs to stop being done so they can put the required nuances of their next strategic plan in place. And that has them calibrating what's really working and not working. But it was fascinating in my conversations with the CEO last week of his recognizing that until he personally calibrates it for himself, models it and requires it of his team, advocates that it can be done, influences the behavior of his direct reports and senior staff, and create the accountability and opportunity to stop doing the same time that they're holding the vision for their 2018 goal that they're launching against now at the beginning of 2011. So am I intentionally to working the example backwards here points to Lee's suggestion earlier that if you were to do a self-evaluation or 360 of a group of leaders in your organization, you're going to be able to see at what point there may be the weakest link. You may have a very solid organization, and yet in all of us, there's usually a place where we can enter a leadership model to focus on it from 1 to 5 if it's a brand new foundation of leadership and there is not a leadership competency model in place, or after having done the assessment and the overview training, I might actually put follow-through in around influencing specific leadership behaviors, starting with best practice 3, and moving to one of the others as the dial is moved towards an overall competency level. Another way that I'd like for you to look at these 5 is best practice 1 actually asks the question, where are you going? Best practice 2 actually asks the question, how are you going to set up or create an environment to grow towards that vision? Best practice 3 says, who are you being as a leader to lead the troops, to lead the way towards that vision or direction. Best practice 4 has the leader be very, very clear. Who is with you on this journey? Who are the people that are the differences that I have here to require their distinctions and differences, at the same time to build team and community throughout the organization? And lastly, best practice 5 is really asking you, what's the evidence of a successful journey towards that goal, towards the strategy of the organization, towards the mission, vision, purpose? Do you have the milestones? And what's the evidence of a successful journey? So you create all of the different looks and approaches here of being able to take the model as being very flexible, very comprehensive, and very sustainable for the best of times and some of the worst of times that we've been through. That leadership development is ongoing and consistently needed to keep our companies really growing and healthy and vibrant. Let's take one last poll. Thinking about your company, where you are right now, which of these 5 best practices is perhaps least developed within your organization? Holder of vision and values, creator of collaboration and innovation, influencer of inspiration and leadership, advocator of differences and community, calibrator of responsibility and accountability. There's never been, obviously, a right or wrong answer to this question, but it's one that has very often informed, as trainers, facilitators, developers, where do we want to start the conversation about effective leadership and about living your legacy now? Where is the strongest element in an organization, and where might be a weakest? Because quite frankly, the flexibility of this model is that you could start at either end. When I'm saying 43% of us now really have a strong collaborative of responsibilities, that we really do have a way to measure. Up until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, best practice 5 was the one that we usually found had the least amount of work done on it. Now we're beginning to see it more and more. If I'm looking now at your responses, it still resides what Lee and I have found traditionally to be somehow the weakest. You'd think in economic times now, the challenges that we're all having, that this would have come much more to the forefront than it has. But even among us in the room, we're still saying that potentially is the least developed. And this would be a place that in my training or in my individual development of leaders could very well focus on this one as a start. Now, often I find the vision. Folks do know where I'm wanting to go, but then the ones in the middle can be all over the place. There is not any rhyme or reason to what Lee and I found on these polls for years now. 2, 3, and 4 can flip in ranking at any point. 1 generally is the one that we spend the most time on, and which puzzles us. It's like the bookend. 5 doesn't have the same attention as number 1 does. I know where I'm going, but I don't have the way to really measure it on a consistent day-by-day basis as that thermostat manages things ongoingly. And I would think at this point, Sarah, let's see what questions that we have that have come in that can help relate to all of this nuances that we've thrown at folks so very quickly.
Absolutely. We do have a number of questions that have come in. Feel free to go ahead and send those in now as well. But let's just start with some of the ones that we have come in already. Bill actually asks, can the legacy model work in a unionized environment?
Let me just start that, Janine, you're going to come in with this too. Anywhere that there is a need for a leader, where a leader stands up, there's always this idea of a complete leadership model, and that's what we find. I mean, even in a unionized situation, you would have a leader who needs to set a vision and values, who needs to collaborate together, who needs to influence well, who needs to advocate for others, and unions are certainly big advocates of their people, and then to get things done. So absolutely, I have no reservations in saying it would fit there. Great question.
Perfect. Thank you. And our next question comes in from Roger. He asks, how can I connect this topic to our leaders who are too busy to even stop thinking?
That is such a perfect question, and it's so frequently asked when we're trying to say, basically, how do I sell leadership development inside of the company? The most successful route Lee and I have found to this point is to find one business deliverable that is a requirement for the ROI or the ROA of the year, the goal for the year, and look to see if a leader was better at putting on his or her team folks with true differences and was able to create a real environment of collaboration and innovation, would that move the dial on the business result? So we tend to back into it to find what is the hot button on the business result, and can we then look to see where the gap is on a leadership competency and skill, and frankly start with that specific one, even in a pilot environment that drives towards the business deliverable.
Great. And we have a few more questions coming in. We do have still some time for some more questions, so feel free to keep sending those in. Crystal asks, how do you reinforce the concepts if the formal leaders do not buy into the model?
Crystal, that is a great question, and we often see this grow within the ranks, whether or not the leaders at the top are invested in it. Still, you may use it on a smaller version, still doing all 5 things, but just with your unique team. It's not something that has to be rolled out at the top in order for it to work. You yourself, each person on the call individually, can take these practices and lead from within. You can lead your family with this. It's not it's not something that you have to just use with organizations, although it has business language in it. But yes, let that be your way of leading wherever you are, and just hope that the leaders at the top will see your example and follow.
In fact, Lee, it's reminded me of one project you and I worked on together for several years. It took almost 3 years for this to literally bubble up. It started at the a management level, and we began to have several teams working together of managers, and 2 of the managers in particular realized that they had overlap in how they were doing some business, that if they combined their efforts would actually start saving money for the company. And out of that effort came 2 or 3 other things that really shifted how the business organized itself, and the results and the customer satisfaction evaluations. Both of those started moving in a direction that the senior leadership began to start paying attention. So it's finding a pocket of possibility, tying that to observable results, and letting it get noisy enough, frankly, that it starts bubbling to the top. That organization that I'm referring to then eventually went to take a model very similar to this. They worked from this and created a customized one for the organization that has now gone organization-wide. But it took, if I'm remembering correctly, almost 3 years for this to get to the full attention of the officer level.
Great, thank you. And we've got time here for one more question. My last question here comes from Laura, and she asks, how do you deal with the X and Y generations with their needs and expectations in leadership? How does this model specifically apply to that generational group?
I would just make sure that whichever leader is embracing this, whether it, Laura, if it's you, just to be sure that you know how the X and Y generations relate to things. And this is a part of Best Practice 4, where you advocate for differences. And when you study that best practice, you'll see that there's room for maybe advocating for the use of those folks who are younger than you are, maybe, to use the best practices as well. Janine, would you add anything to that?
I was thinking the same way, Lee. I would start with the best practice 4 when I'm actually looking at what is their differences, what's their distinctions, how does this show up and help the company. Then being certain, I'd go to 2, to how can we require the best of them, and how does that then fit their personal vision of their contribution at the company as well as the company. So it's starting with where they are and pulling out their uniquenesses, building that then into the construct of the model.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies. If we did not get to answer your question, or if you have additional questions, feel free to email those into us. We'll go ahead and Janine and Lee will absolutely respond to any questions additionally that come in. But as an exclusive offer, do please try the Legacy Leadership Competency Inventory. We have the self-online assessment for free for you. You'll get an email confirmation after today's participation, and that'll give you a link right to the product. And you want to use the coupon code. It's LLWebinar all together. Use that at checkout, and you'll be able to take the assessment for free so you can experience it yourself. Also at HRDQ.com, you will find a connection to Janine and Lee's book, Legacy Leadership, The Leader's Guide to Lasting Greatness, that is available on Amazon. And I know from their experience, they've found that the book really provides a nice, rich background for today's model. So thank you very much for your time. We hope you found today's webinar very informative.